It does kind of feel reminiscent of cross country, doesn't it?
Oh my god, my heart is racing. Yeah,
Okay.
It feels like we're on the start line. It's fine.
We are. All right. Ready? Hello.
Hello.
I'm Ronnie.
I'm Abby.
And this is Dragons in the Details, where we pick apart our favorite fantasy series over the course of an undetermined number of episodes. This season will be focused on the Empyrean series by Rebecca Yarros. And quick disclaimer, these episodes will contain spoilers up through Onyx Storm. If you have not finished Onyx Storm, save this and come back later. Due to the contents of this series, this podcast is rated R and should only be listened to by those comfortable hearing explicit content. Okay, now that that's out of the way. Each week, we're going to dive into a specific topic in depth. We think we'll follow that structure, but also, again, we're winging this first podcast. Your guess is as good as ours as to how all of this goes. We will come with receipts. We're going to have quotes to back up any theories so you can follow along if you're skeptical, or you don't have to. We don't really care. This episode will be focused on Xaden Riorson, our favorite shadow-wielding martyr. We're going to start with corrections and omissions from last episode. Abby, any corrections or omissions to share?
All right. So 2 corrections and omissions from last week. The first one I realized as I was making my notes for this episode to do this deep dive. And then the second one I had realized a long time ago, but I forgot to bring it up during our conversation about dream walking. So first one. When Xaden is having one of his dreams that Violet is in, but she doesn't realize it's Xaden's dreams, Xaden says about Berwyn, the sage, he says, his power works here, but mine never does. So we talked about last week how Violet can create these dreams. She can create weapons in these dreams. She can feel things in these dreams, but she can also I think she can wield lightning in the dreams, which I think means that she's going to probably face off against Berwyn in the dreams and kill him with her lightning signet, is my guess. I don't know. We'll see. But I think that would be pretty cool and a pretty good use of her signet. The second one, and this one's kind of bigger and has bigger implications, is that we know that these books are written in the first person, but we also know that they're transcribed by Jesinia because of the note that's in the beginning of the books, right? And we know that Jesinia cannot read minds. She is a scribe. She does not have a dragon. She does not have power. I guess unless she turns venin, but that would be kind of wild. I don't think she's going to do that. So I think that this is Violet's signet. I think she can literally project. We know she can project memories, right? She does it with Xaden. So I think she's going to get to the point where she can do it with Jesinia too. And she is projecting this entire tale, this entire story into Jesinia's mind, which in my mind also means that Violet will live long enough after the conclusion of this story to do that with Jesinia, which in my mind means Violet's going to live. That doesn't mean Rebecca agrees with me, but that's what I think. That's my hope, at least.
Yeah. I never thought about it from the Jesinia angle, but it does make sense, even with what we were talking about last week with Violet mind walking, just in general. Jesinia would have to learn and believe all of this from Violet's exact perspective somehow. And we know, she projects through Tyrrendor all the time in this series. So,
right.
Interesting.
It doesn't make sense that it's both written by Jesinia and written in the first person. And we know, and I mean, I'm taking it the way Berwyn's signet is, right? He creates a reality in someone else's mind. So Violet's just doing that. Now that I think about it, if that is what's happening, also means she's an unreliable narrator and could be lying about things, which would be an interesting twist. But
especially since we hear already directly from Asher that you always have to check who's telling the story. Yeah.
That would be very interesting. I don't know what's going to happen with that, but you should keep tabs on that. Maybe we can't trust Violet.
Yeah. I like to think that Jesinia is kind of our faithful narrator, but if that is, yeah, that's tough. I don't know. We'll see.
I don't know.
Okay, I have one correction, and it's honestly just a tactical correction from last week as I was listening back through and also looking through notes for this week. So when we were talking last week, talked about the fact that there are sources of magic and basically made it seem like my belief is that dragons are not actually a true source of magic with the exception of Irids. And as I was going through Fourth Wing and Iron Flame, I realized that basically Rebecca presents it as kind of an accepted truth in both of those books that dragons are a source, Sigale is a source, Tyrrendor is a source, there are sources of magic. And I'm more just correcting that we're aware of that. We're aware of how it's presented in the early books, but I am basically rejecting that notion because we hear that dragons are gatekeepers, and why would we ever call something the source if there's more than one source? So aside from I guess I'm acknowledging that is how these are presented in the books, is dragons are sources of magic, but I think the only real sources of magic so far are the source, ground sky, like goodness knows.
Yeah.
Irids and Violet.
I definitely thought that dragons channel directly from the source and that humans channel from dragons. I don't have exact quotes to back me up.
I don't think it's ever phrased that way.
Fascinating. Rebecca, I love you. I love you.
I don't think it's ever phrased that way.
Okay.
Like
if you are listening,
magic, Terran's magic, like that sort of thing.
If you are one of the 5 people who might listen to this podcast and you have quotes, please let us know. I think that's really interesting that she's being super sketchy.
Yeah, about whether dragons are true sources of magic or not. I think she's definitely led us to water, and the water is that they are not, but it's the propaganda at Basgaeth is that dragons are implicit sources of magic, I believe.
Right, because I can't remember his name now, but the Irid who comes and collects Andarna. Leothan, thank you. He doesn't say you're a dragon, you're magic. He says you are Irid, you're magic.
You are magic, yeah.
Right, implying that Irids are magic and the other dragons are not.
Yeah, and the way that Theophany looks at Andarna, like, contrary to the way that she looks at every single other dragon ever, definitely sets them in like a league of their own. Yeah.
I agree. Interesting. All right.
Okay.
Ready to talk about our favorite character ever?
Xaden Riorson. Wait, can you say the way that you think it's pronounced again?
Riorson. There's videos on YouTube that's how you say it.
Okay.
I don't know. We'll find out.
We'll just leave it at Xaden. Abby, what do you think of Xaden?
People can fight about it. Fucking loves it. Love him.
Tell me why.
Oh my God, why not?
Fair.
He's so good. Like, literally from Forthwig, from like the moment they meet under the tree. Like, Dane who? Fuck Dane. I don't care about Dane. Like, he is so good at lifting her up, but also kind of making sure she's safe always, right? Like, he supports her, he champions her. He's very stressed out whenever she's in danger, but he won't prevent her from going into danger, which I like. He's like the perfect level of like protective and supportive. He's clearly hot, so clearly like literally worships her, the ground she stands on. I mean, like, how could any man compete? And he's just created like the perfect man here. I don't know. I don't know what to do with these feelings that I have.
You can't do anything because he is fictional.
I know, it's a problem. We'll get into this later. I don't think he's perfect. I don't think he's necessarily like a good guy. Like, he's a good guy, but like, I definitely think there's some sketchy shit he does. I don't think he's the perfect boyfriend. He's complicated, which I love. I didn't even have another character to compare him to. I think he is the most well-written, well-rounded, interesting love interest I've ever read.
This is why we need Abby to read A Court of Thorns and Roses, for the love of God, or gods, if you will. But yes, I agree. He's on par with maybe one other fictional character I've ever read. Sorry, keep going.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't really have much more to say without getting into like what we're talking about today.
Yeah.
I just like, you read some books or you watch some movies and you're like, okay, like, yeah, I get that they're in love. I don't really see why, though. And I think she does such a good job of laying the groundwork for this relationship, right? So can I go on a slight rant here?
Can you get closer to the mic when you do it, please?
Yes. It really bothers me that I know I've kind of gone on this rant before, but that these books are called Romantasy, right? There is definitely more sex in Game of Thrones. No question. No one has those Romantasy, right? It's just that she writes growth fantasy and she happens to write really fucking amazing sex scenes. And so it's like pushed into this Romantasy category, which I think is complete bullshit. Like, I think it's condescending. I think it's because she's a woman. I think these are just fantasy books and they belong with the fantasy greats. And like, there's no reason for it. It really fucking bothers me. There's 2 sex scenes in the first book. It's like a 500 page, maybe 400 page book. Like,
yeah.
Grow up, people. These books are fantasy and they're freaking good. Like,
yeah.
I don't know.
I agree.
It bothers me.
I agree. And I also honestly, like, more recently, well, in Onyx Storm, I've gotten more upset. Upset's the wrong word. Obviously, and I'll just get into it. Like, I think that Xaden is probably the most attractive character to be written into existence ever. So that, like, let's leave that there because that deserves like its own, like, that's great. But I still think it's a disservice to him as a character to just be like, he is perfect for like the explicit scenes, the intimacy, the boyfriend piece. Like, I love Xaden because he's been successfully portrayed as this like morally gray, antagonistic, kind of dark character. When you look at the facts, especially leading up to Violet, he's legitimately never done a single thing for himself, ever.
That's true.
Like, his father started a rebellion for like good reasons, not for evil reasons. And he was literally just a kid at the time, but he has since been villainized for it, watched his father die, and then like leaned into the villainization to broker a deal to protect his people. And he had to broker a deal with the people who murdered his father. Like, that's messed up. And yes, he's like ruthless, but he's ruthless with people who deserve it.
Yeah. Like, and it's so interesting too, because that villainization of him that we get at the beginning is because these books are from Violet's point of view. It is because she's been raised by Basgaiath, right? Like, she does not know the truth. And so it's like, this is obvious, but like, as she learns more, as her opinion of Xaden changes and she realizes what he's done to keep the people he loves safe, like, we become more sympathetic to him and we start to change our thinking. Like, we can't trust what we've been told about the rebellion and the marked ones and all that, which is one of those things that you can just do with first person that you can't really do with an omniscient narrator, which I love.
Yeah, I agree. I also, like, honestly, what do I think of Xaden? Like, I just want him to get a break. He deserves a break. Like, he's been through so much. He lost his father. His mother abandoned him.
His mother's a bitch.
Yeah, he's struck deals with his father's executioners. And he just like feels this crushing need to save everyone he can, to the point where he's literally ruined himself. And like, regardless of what he's done, for those reasons, it has to count for something. And I feel like he deserves a happy ending, and I don't know if he's going to get one.
I think it's interesting that you said he'll save everyone he can, because like, that's kind of true. But once he meets Violet, it's like, no, you can all burn. I'm just saving Violet. I don't care. Right. Like, he literally says, I would gladly let Orisha burn if it meant I save your life.
He said that, but I mean, we'll talk about him turning, but he saves Dane, he saves Kath, he saves Imogen, he skirts over Bodhi. Yes, he like stops and pauses at Violet, and that's why I think like, we'll talk about this more in the episode, but like, up until Violet, it is very clear to me, like, he is like morally sound.
Interesting. I think he's Machiavellian in his idea of goodness.
Sure.
I think totally agree that he is always working towards the greater good, but I think he'll do anything. It's kind of like, he'll do anything to get there. And does that mean he's still good? I don't know. I don't have the answer. And that's why I love these books, because there's so much to talk about, actually.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, the first question before anything we've written out for ourselves is, which book Xaden is your favorite Xaden?
And we have different opinions on this, I think.
We do, 100%. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to change my answer, because it's honestly like all the books kind of meld together for me, and he just is a character. But I love Iron Flame Xaden. I think he's so noble. I think the way that he treats Violet when they're not together and he's desperately trying to get her back. Like, he won't manipulate her with sex. Like, he's just very respectful of her boundaries, but still very clear. He's like, I'm in love with you. I don't love when he's like, you're in love with me, but like, he's intrinsic. He does know that she's in love with him.
Yeah.
So like,
fully reading her mind. Yeah.
Well, and we'll talk about that too. Like, he is straight up reading her mind. I just think he's really noble in that book. I don't know. I'm a sucker for longing. Like, I'm a sucker for a couple that's like wants to be together but isn't together. Like, that's kind of my favorite trope. So that might be part of why Iron Flame Xaden is my favorite Xaden. And then when they finally do get back together in the shower in Samara, the way that scene is written, it took me like a couple of times to kind of realize it. I was like, oh, well, whatever, fuck it. They're just back together. But she says something like, basically like, I want to sleep with you. I am not guaranteeing we're getting back together. And you just have to take this chance. And he does it, which I think is really kind of noble. Like, he's like, okay, I will give you what you want because I want it too. But because I love you, because I will give you what you want, even though I know it may hurt me. which I feel like is the first time he's kind of been vulnerable that way, and maybe leads down this dark path that we're walking down with him when he realizes in Samara that he can't control every outcome. He can't make every decision ahead of time. Some things he's just going to have to leave to chance and trust that it will work out.
Yeah.
So I love Xaden and Iron Flame when they're not together. I love him when they're together too. But I think the way he treats her when they're apart makes him A+ in my mind. He's not a dick. He's never a dick to her. He's never forcing her to do anything. He's just like, and he's very clear, right? Like with the wording of the rooms too, right? Like she can bring in whoever she wants. He can only bring in her.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty noble. I think that's pretty sweet. It might also be manipulative. I don't know, but it's not because he doesn't tell her that, right? She asks.
Yeah. Yeah. He also, I mean, yes, I think Xaden's entire build-up across all of the books is very important to who he becomes, and ultimately my favorite version of Xaden, which we disagree on this. My favorite Xaden is Onyx Storm Xaden, but only because we had Iron Flame Xaden first. So we know that when he's not getting what he wants, he's still good to Violet. I think that's important. But if I had to stack rank the versions of Xaden in my head, Iron Flame Xaden is last. Like,
my God, really?
Yes. The emotional maturity is amazing. But he's also, in this book, like, let's not forget, he's, like, blocking himself off from her. He's, like, forcing her to feel. Like, he is making things conditional in that book as well. Whereas in Onyx Storm, we just hear and see him being absolutely committed, regardless of anything at any time. And is he self-destructive along the way? For sure. For sure he is. But he loves so loudly in Onyx Storm, whereas in Iron Flame, I feel like we just continued to, and I think you like this about, like, you like these plot lines, so it makes sense that you like Iron Flame Xaden the best, but he is so, like, he still has a part of himself that's closed off in Iron Flame, and I'm like, come on, dude.
I know, but I'm just kind of like, yeah, he's gotta have secrets. Like, yeah, that is who you chose. Like,
yeah.
Fundamental issue with Onyx Storm Xaden is that I'm mad at him for turning. I'm like, lucky 5% of me is mad that he made that choice. Like, I think we should talk about this. Did he have to turn?
So,
I think he did.
He had to turn or die, is the way that I, like, read it, basically. He had to either turn or sacrifice, like, himself and Sigale, and therefore turn and die. And there's another character in another book that is basically Xaden, but the version of Xaden that would die instead of turn dark, like would die for her before he did all of this. And I think that is like a fair question to ask, is like, why is what Xaden did really for Violet, or is it self-preservation plus Violet? Like, he is still selfish enough to keep himself on this planet to exist with her. And I think it's a fair question.
She is about to raise the wards. Nothing that Xaden did gets her any closer to raising the wards, right? Like, at the end of the day, it was Lilith. It wasn't even Violet.
Well, he felt her dying. Like, he felt like her,
right.
She was drained, her shields came down, and he felt that she was going to sacrifice herself to make it happen. And he couldn't feel anyone around her or tell that Lilith was going to sacrifice herself for her. So all he knew from where he was is that Violet was basically giving in.
Yeah, I know. But still, if Xaden doesn't turn, just even from let's not even talk about motivations. Let's just talk about plot. If Xaden doesn't turn at the end of Iron Flame, does it change the outcome of the battle? I don't think so. Like, I think the wards still go up, and I think Berwyn still has to peace. Right. I mean, also, it seems like venin can do a lot within the wards, but that's a different conversation.
Yeah.
But like, I don't know that this actually accomplished anything.
I think it's entirely possible that, well, I actually think it's factually correct that the battle would have ended the same way. He just might have died.
Yeah. Which obviously I don't want him to die, but I don't know. I think it's a complicated choice. Anyway.
Ugh, I just want him to be okay.
I know. I want them both to live. Obviously, it's almost like I want Xaden to live and I want Violet to live because Xaden can't live without Violet. But if the story ends with Violet living and Xaden dead, devastating. Absolutely devastating.
Yeah. I think part of the reason that I'm so, like, I know that you are optimistic about the end of this series and I am not. And part of the reason why is I will actually be so emotionally devastated if Xaden does not make it.
Oh my God, I know. I'm going to have to take a month off work.
Yeah, I don't have time for that. Okay, well, agree to
Shall we?
disagree on favorite book, Xaden.
It's okay. I still, I love all Xaden. I think he's great. I love him.
Yeah, we love him. We love him. Okay, should we get into the questions?
Yes, let's do it.
Okay, so the first one we asked ourselves, and I'll lead off, is let's discuss Xaden's family tree. So for anyone watching on YouTube, I had to draw this out because I can't make sense of it in my brain without drawing it out. And I don't think I'm going to be able to like speak to it while I'm holding it up, but just I'm going to hold it here for your mind's eye. What?
I also have diagonal lines on mine. I actually have two versions of it because I think there's two things that could be going on. But yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a lot of branches of different scenarios. So let's start with what we know. Okay. We know that Xaden is the son of Xaden Riorson and Talia as the product of a contract marriage. We learn next to nothing about Fen other than all of the rebellion stuff, except that Xaden did love him. He adored his father. Fen's last words were, "You're all cowards," and that he was infantry, and obviously the Duke of Tyrrendor. We know that Xaden Riorson had a sister, and we learn virtually nothing about her, but we assume that she's Bodhi's mother, given Bodhi is second in line. So we got Xaden, Fen and Talia, Fen's sister, Bodhi, and that kind of comprises of it's comprehensive of the people that we have met in some regard to date. Xaden's grandfather, and we don't know whether it's on his dad's side or his mom's side, we know was at Basgaeth and was bonded to Sagail as her second rider. He was documented as Xaden's great uncle on paper, and he didn't make it out of the quadrant. He didn't make it out of the Riders Quadrant. He died at Basgaeth. So let's start with just talking about the misdocumentation, because I think that could have happened in a few ways, and it's more interesting. It's interesting to think about both options, right? Is it Fen's parents or Talia's parents where this happened? So it could have, what?
I have an option 2A and an option 2B, but yeah, let's talk about it.
Okay. So the first option is his grandfather could have impregnated a woman and then his brother married her to care for the child. So that's a way that could have happened. Grandfather also could have, his documented father's wife could have also had an affair with her significant other's brother. That could have also been a way that this happened. And importantly, Sagail would know. So like Sagail knows how this happened, regardless of which side it's on. This also means that either Fen or Talia, whoever it is, would have had to be conceived while in the Riders Quadrant. And we're told that Xaden's grandfather never makes it out. So like they had to at least be conceived there, if not born there, which is weird and interesting. And I think the part that makes it interesting to consider if it happened on Fen's side is there's like a question of legitimacy of line, if that's the case. Like if this is Fen's father, then he was effectively named heir when he might have been the child of like a second in line or somebody else. But what do you think is your 2A and 2B? I'm curious.
Oh, that's so interesting. I didn't even think about that. Yeah, because nobility doesn't usually go into the Riders Quadrant, right?
No. Yeah. He wouldn't have been first in line. He wasn't.
Okay.
If it's Fen's side. But like this is just if it's Fen's side, which we don't actually know for sure.
I feel safe in assuming it's Fen's side. Like Talia is from the Isles. I have absolutely no thoughts if these are Talia's parents. We just don't know enough. I definitely think it's Fen's side. So my two options were and I think this is probably what happened, what you said, that Fen's father goes to the Riders Quadrant, impregnates a girl, dies, and his brother steps in and says, "I will raise this child as my own," which raises the question of the sister, right? Yeah. Is it a full sister? Is it a half sister? If it's a full sister, I assume it's twins, or they're getting real busy. I don't know. I don't know that matters. if you're thinking about it, the through line, you have to think about it. Yeah,
well, I actually do feel like it has to be a half sister. Like how else? Like unless somebody was actually born and raised in the Riders Quadrant, which I find really unlikely because then it would have been documented, right? There wouldn't have been opportunity for misdocumentation. Like I think this had to be a one-time instance, very covert, or twins, to your point. Yeah.
It's option A. B, and I don't know why this would be, is that Fenn's father is impersonating his brother in the Rider Squadron, the way that Aaric is pretending to be, the way that Cam is pretending to be Aaric, whatever. I don't think that necessarily makes sense.
Fenn's father is impersonating his brother.
Yeah. Fenn's father is pretending to be someone else.
Fenn's documented father or biological father?
Fenn's biological father is pretending to be his
in a true
brother.
Aaric scenario. Oh, I see.
A true Aaric scenario. Yeah. Like he's just pretending. And I don't know why he would do that unless, so this is so interesting because we don't know if Fenn's father is the firstborn or the secondborn. So
I assume that if this is all happening on Fenn's side, then it is Fenn's documented father's younger brother, because Fenn's documented father was the Duke.
Right. But it could be an Aaric situation, right? Where he wanted to be a rider, but because nobility are not allowed, he pretended to be the second son.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Like he basically, like if Halden were to, like, what's the word for revoke your right to the
abdicate.
Throne? I don't know. Abdicate, yeah. If he were to abdicate and like abscond off to the Rider Squadron. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Because he wanted to be a rider. I think the much more likely scenario is that, I think you're right. I think the much more likely scenario is that Fenn's biological father is the second son, dies, Fenn's brother, the first son, takes the child in. I still think that makes Fenn the heir. But if not, I guess Bodhi's the heir.
Well, I think that's what's like a little bit called into question, right? Like that's what I mean about just like causing weirdness around legitimacy of line. Like if Fenn is actually the non-heir's child and Fenn's sister therefore would have been the like rightful heir if that like lineage were accepted to be true, then that would mean that Bodhi would be meant to be like the rightful heir, right? But I don't know. Nothing about Bodhi so far has indicated that he wants that. In fact, quite the opposite. And so I don't know how much this really matters, but it is kind of interesting to think about.
I think it matters because I think it calls Violet's claim into question, which I think is going to be really important. And we'll answer that more in question 2.
Yeah. I mean, we'll talk about Violet and Bodhi because like that's a separate thing.
Yeah.
But I think first we should talk about the death, because the most frustrating thing to me about all of this is the fact that Scale knows, and Xaden also probably knows, and we just don't learn anything about it and don't talk about it. But we know that Xaden's biological grandfather, did not make it out of the Rider Squadron, and so there are 4 main ways to die at Biscaya.
They never said he died.
They said he didn't make it out.
I know.
The fourth one is not dying. The 4th one's not dying. Relax. Normal course of business, falling off your dragon. I really doubt that that's how a rider of Sigales dies. Like, I just don't see that happening for her. 2, dying in a challenge. Also don't see this happening. 3, manifesting an illegal signet, based on what we know about Xaden and the fact that this is Sigale's second bonded rider, not first. Interesting. Or turning. And again, I mean, they say he didn't make it out of the Rider Squadron. And in one of Xaden's dreams, which we've already talked about, a venin says, "You are ours, you'll bring what I want," or she dies, and holds the sword of Tyrrendor to Xaden's throat. And he has a tan arm.
And yes, tan arm and surprisingly youthful face.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, is Xaden's grandfather...
This is my Big Five Corner theory. I'm just getting there now because we're here. Yeah, it could be. It's totally getting set up that way. I think it's important. This man is mentioned 5 times, I think, in Iron Flame alone. He's going to come up. It's going to be important. You don't just drop. Like, Rebecca will mention things twice and they become really important. He's mentioned 5 fucking times. Like, yeah. I think Berwyn is Grandpa Riorson. I think there's definitely. But then again, like, I think we still do have to talk about the wards because, like, Xaden turns venin when the wards are down. But Jack apparently turns venin within the wards. It sounds like if Grandpa is Berwyn, that he turns venin within the wards. That girl who's wielding in the sparring, the signet sparring, she just turns venin within the wards. What do the wards do? Do they do anything? I'm getting really confused.
I also just think it's hard to imagine someone turning and like defecting from the Riders. Like, he had to have faked his own death, right? Like, there's no other way that would have been like just accepted and people would have been like, oh yeah, cool, like the rest of the Ryersons can enter the Rider Squadron after this one turned.
So this is so interesting because Sigale chooses Xaden, right?
Mhm.
Because he reminds her of his grandfather. If he turned, Sigale cannot be surprised that Xaden turns, but she seems surprised. Like,
She
she
seems
seems
angry.
disappointed. Yeah.
She seems angry. I wouldn't say she seems terribly surprised. She's almost, I mean, by the time he like fully turns, she's like, you've resisted so long up until this point, like don't give in now. Almost as if she's seen it before.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, I'm pretty sold on the Berwyn is grandpa. Like, I don't think it's Fen. I know people think it's Fen. I think Fen died very publicly. You said that to me many times, that Fen died publicly. He has the sword of Tyrrendor. He has a tan arm. He has a youthful face. It's just hard to believe it could be anyone else. Who else do we know who's tan and has like a surprisingly youthful face? Means he turned when he was like young, right? So, and
Yeah.
Berwyn's gonna be someone we know, right? It's like heading in that direction.
Yeah. And it makes a lot of things make sense too, because, and I know we'll talk about this later too, but like the desire for, or like the targeting Xaden explicitly, aside from his power, which I think is important, it makes more sense if that's the case. So, but I know that's another question we're going to get into with more.
In which case, are they both half venin? Did he turn before or after?
Yeah. Don't know. Could have been an initiate.
They can have sex.
Yeah. Yes. So like that's obviously the Fen path. The Talia path I have no real thoughts on. Like she's from the Isles, or presumed from the Isles. She's there now. I don't think this is anywhere near as fun if it's all on her side. So I'm accepting that that is not true. But we can't forget the part of the family tree which consists of Xaden's now half-brothers. So that's also a thing floating out there. He has 2 half-brothers in the Isles.
Yeah. I don't actually have any notes on them, and I'm now looking at my notes for Talia. Let's come back and make more notes. I never did. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I think it's interesting, obviously, that Talia is from Hedotus, and Violet is so reverent of knowledge and wisdom. Like, I feel like that was a plant. I guess now you could also argue that Xaden has the mind of a scribe and the heart of a writer, in that his mother is from Hedotus, and therefore that reverence of knowledge, in theory, was instilled in him. Whether or not it was actually instilled in him is a question, I think. But he certainly values that in Violet. He loves how smart Violet is, right? So he recognizes that it is important to be smart. It is important to know things. Yeah, I don't have much on Talia, except that, like, I don't know, could be good for alliances, right? Like if Violet needs to raise an army, if Xaden needs to raise an army. But they kind of tried that in Onyx Storm and it didn't work. So I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I think like the history of it also makes sense. Like a contract marriage would have made sense at the time for the Isles to ally with Tyrrendor. And so I think it points to like this like indication of the rest of the world. And then there's Navarre. And we know also that, I mean, the Isles have played roles in forming alliances with the Krovla. And so, yeah, I think the more interesting part is just thinking about like how and why they came together in a contract marriage, more than thinking about like what her line means at this point, because we just don't know enough.
This just occurred to me. Remember in Deverelli, when Cortland says something to Xaden, again, I don't have the exact quote because this just came to me, but basically like, oh, like your father always was like honoring his agreements with us. Like he implies that there was an agreement between Fen and Cortland that was like positive and good, and that it lasted much longer than people thought. Like they thought that the Isles had been cut off. Well, okay, Fen thing. Do you think that Deverelli brokered the marriage between Fen and Talia?
It would make sense because they also brokered the alliance between Krovla and whatever Isle aided Krovla. Yeah.
That's what I'm thinking. I don't know that matters, but we know there was some kind of deal.
Yeah.
Unless it means Xaden now owes something to Deverelli, but I doubt it. I don't know. But like he didn't know she was from Hedotus, right? He had no idea.
Right. Yeah, it like dawns on him when he sees her, like, oh, no wonder she liked color and stuff like that.
Yeah. Interesting.
Okay.
Interesting.
I have nothing else sane to say about Xaden's family tree.
The only other thing I had, let me see my notes real quick, sorry. I think the only other thing I had was, depending on when Xaden's grandfather didn't make it out of the quadrant, maybe Fen was born in the quadrant, and maybe that's why he hates riders. I think you're right. Like, I don't think Fen was born in the quadrant. That doesn't make any sense. And who's Fen's mom? Is she a writer, or is she just some random barmaid? Like, who is this woman?
Yeah. I don't know. Because she had to know both Fenn's biological father and then his brother.
Yeah, okay. So we know in year 1, they're not allowed to leave. So if he dies in year 1, she's a rider. If he dies in year 2 and 3, we don't know. It means nothing.
Right.
Yeah.
But if I think, was it year 3 that they were allowed to? No, year 2, they're allowed to fraternize with other quadrants, right?
Yeah, they're allowed to fraternize with the quadrants. They're allowed to go to the town that in my mind is Hogsmeade, but it's not called Hogsmeade.
Yeah, it clearly is a Hogsmeade, though. The only other thing, so that makes sense. I agree with that. The only other thing that's kind of interesting, and we, again, have literally nothing to go off of, so this is just me and my thoughts, is Sigale's first rider. Like, was that also a relative? Who the heck was that? Yeah.
Riorson, sorry. Yeah, we have nothing. There's no mention of it. Yeah.
So, okay.
All right.
Next question then. Is Xaden good?
Right. I'm going to take us on a wild journey here. And I'm not sure it answers the question, but I think we have to talk about it. So let's start with item 1. Xaden absolutely 100% can read Violet's mind. Not her intentions. He can just read her fucking mind. Like in Fourth Wing too. So this is before he turns venin. This is before anything. We know that because after he comes in, when she's about to die, when she's dreaming and Taryn tells her to wake up, and then Orin and like the 7 other people are in her room about to kill her, Xaden rushes in very sexily and kills everyone with shadows in like a snap. And she thinks to herself, I'm alive, I'm alive, I'm alive. I repeat the mantra as Xaden wipes the blood from my dagger on the back of Orin's tunic. And he says, yes, you're alive. Full stop. Right? She doesn't say it out loud. I think she says after that, I didn't realize I said that out loud. And he just kind of like smiles at her.
They do that all the time. Also.
All the time.
Like she will say like, oh, I didn't realize I said that out loud. Or like, oops, wrong connection when she meant to speak to Taryn. All the time. Yes.
All the time. But wanted to pull the Fourth Wing quotes because once you get to Onyx Storm, like his signet is growing. There's an argument to be made that like, okay, he couldn't fully read minds before, but now he can. So this is another one at the end of Fourth Wing. And we only get this because we get Xaden's point of view at the end. But she says, I know what you're thinking. Or he says, I know what you're thinking. This is at the end when they're fighting. She's found out that he's supplying the weapons to the Paromial, and she's really mad at him. And he says, I know what you're thinking. And she says, you have no idea what I'm thinking. And then she thinks to herself, fucking traitor. And then in the very last chapter, so 50 pages have happened between this, right? So this is when he's sitting by her bed and like she's poisoned and she's sleeping it off. He goes, sleep is where I hear her call me a fucking traitor over and over again. She never says fucking traitor out loud. She only thinks it. He should up lying to her. Like, and I don't really have a justification for that. I don't know how you say, oh, it's okay that he reads her mind, because Dane did the same fucking thing. And we were all mad at him for half a book about it. Right?
Yeah.
So like, I don't.
Xaden's mind reader, 100%.
And maybe it's just her. Maybe it's always been just her, even before. Oh, I guess they're bonded at this point. But like, maybe he doesn't realize he can fully read minds because he can only fully read Violet's mind. But he does tell her, once I realized I could, I stopped. Like, once I realized who you were to me, I stopped reading your mind. I knew that wasn't fair. And once I realized that Dane had done that to you, I stopped, right? But he didn't say, oh, yeah, and by the way, I can fully read your mind, not just your intentions. So,
yeah. And it could be exactly what happened with her intrinsic signet, right? Where he accidentally manifested it on her before he could manifest it on anybody else, because she's like the easiest connection to him. But it is morally damning that he said nothing at any point. Yeah, I agree.
Right. So I want you to keep in mind as I walk you down this road that Xaden lies. I think it's important. And I haven't seen anyone else talking about what I'm about to talk about, so I'm either way off base, probably way off base. Let's just go with that. But I think it's fun. So how does Xaden get Tyrrendor back, right? What he says to Violet, I didn't win it. I didn't even ask for it. I'm the last person who should have this throne, right? They actually agreed to give it back, and I wish they hadn't. Not now, not when I'm like this, not when I'm a venin, basically. He gave me my title and the seat in Scenarium, not just Orisha either. He gave me Tyrrendor. So Xaden's whole story is that he didn't want the seat back. They gave it back to him because, I forget, Llewellyn and the other guy were in trouble because they kept Orisha's secret, which Xaden also did. Thank you very much. So they couldn't give it to them, so they gave it back to Xaden. And Violet believes him. And he's like, you have to help me protect it. I'm so sorry. Like, you have to do this for me because we have to protect it. When they are in, so that's Xaden's side of the story, right? When they are in Deverelli, when Halden has fucked up the negotiations like beyond reason. And they are basically like, Halden, you have to get out of here. We're pulling you off the job, basically, right? You have failed. We are taking over from here. Go get back in your basket and fly home. Halden says, you are the son of a traitor who blackmailed his way into a title, right? Blackmailed. Not, oh, you were reluctant, you didn't want it. You fucking schemed to get your title back. We know Xaden can read minds. Xaden could so easily blackmail his way back into a title. Like, it's totally within the realm of possibility, and he could be lying to Violet about it, right?
Yeah.
Which, like, that is a totally different story, right? You go from a guy who reluctantly has power to a guy who is scheming to get power back. We don't know why, right? On top of that, Xaden only starts talking about marrying Violet basically immediately after he gets his title back, right? So it's not like, I'm so in love with you, I want to marry you. It's, I have Tyrrendor. I need you to help me protect it. I think, and then he starts dropping, I think she'd be a great duchess. She's my consort.
Yeah.
Girlfriend is far too casual a term for what we are, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to pause for a second. Do you have any thoughts on what
I'm feeling the same way I'm feeling when we first brought up the Violet is pregnant trope. Like, I know that there's merit to this. I don't want to believe it, but like, I know that there is.
All right, great. I'm about to shift again. So right now, this means Xaden's a pretty bad guy, right? This means like he is not who we thought he was. He is not who Violet thought he was. And he has turned venin at this point. So we can't really trust his motivations. We don't really know what he's thinking. Like, if he weren't venin, would he want the seat of power? Do the venin want the seat of power? Is that what's happening? I'm going to make your day here because I don't think so. I don't think that's what's happening. I think Xaden and Aaric are scheming at this point. I think because immediately after he gets his seat of power back, that is when so to set the scene, we talked about this last episode, but this is when the Flyers, the Yarros riders, and the Basgayath riders are all fighting. Violet comes in and makes this great speech about how we have to work together, how all of the previous generations have failed. If we don't come together now, we will fail too. And it's a great speech. And Aaric and Xaden and some others from the scenario are talking to her after. And Aaric says, that was a great speech. I think she'd be an amazing general, don't you think? And Xaden says, or maybe like nobility or something. And Xaden says, at least a duchess, right? That is the first point where he implies that they should get married, right?
And it also, the way that played out in my head as I was reading it was almost like an inside joke. Like the two of them were joking around together.
I understand. But I think they're already scheming at this point, which means that Xaden...
No, I know. An inside joke is then they've been communicating.
Right.
Sorry, keep going.
That's what I'm saying. Xaden had to get his seat of power back because Violet, for whatever reason, we don't know yet. I think it is imperative that Violet is the Duchess of Tyrrendor and Arisha. Like, I don't know what the scheme is. But we're gonna find out that it is like she has to be in that seat. And so, again, this is where I get back to the Machiavellian thing. I believe Halden. Xaden absolutely blackmailed his way back into the seat. I don't know what he did. I don't know what dirt he has on the scenarium. I don't know what dirt he has on King Tarry, but I totally believe that is what happened. But I think he probably still did it for the greater good. I think he probably is still doing this to save Violet and to save Tyrrendor. And then there's that quote from Llewellyn where Xaden and Violet are fighting because he's basically about to give up. It's right after Lynx manifests his signet and he's like, oh fuck, there's a new shadow wielder. Nature has decided that I'm not on the good side anymore. Nature is manifesting the good shadow wielder. So he's like, I'm fucked. I have to get out of here. I just have to run away. And him and Violet are fighting, and Llewellyn comes up and says, it's really hard to be in a relationship with someone who's nobility. And I forget the exact wording, but it's you have to do what's right for Tyrrendor. And she says, right for Tyrrendor or right for Xaden? And he says, they're the same thing at this point. There is no difference between them. They are the same.
Yeah.
And in the battle where it's the Battle of Arisha, where it's the second time Theophany shows up. It's towards the end of the book, but it's not the final battle, where Aaric says, you have to go protect the Temple of Dune. He says, it's how you save Tyrrendor, right? Not it's how you save Arisha, it's how you save Tyrrendor. Tyrrendor and Xaden are the same. Or
their fates are linked. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think this is all a scheme. I think this is all to get us to the point where Violet is in charge of Tyrrendor, and that will save Xaden and everyone, probably. But I think Rebecca's taking us on a crazy fucking journey is what I think.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think the scenario that you just described is most likely. There is like a very real part of me that deeply fears Rebecca taking us on this like Xaden demise journey and like keeps two real options like warm in the background for Violet, and like I can't entertain that and I can't handle it.
Who do you think are the options?
Well, Dane for sure.
Yeah.
And
Dane
Bodhi.
and Sloane. Bodhi probably turned.
We don't know.
But you're gonna say Aaric.
When Bodhi is defending her, she's like, what an odd choice of companion.
I know.
Seeing as you reek of his kin. And Bodhi says, I'm here protecting my cousin, protecting my province. And Theophany looks straight at him and says, and her.
I totally agree. Bodhi's definitely in love with Violet. Everyone is in love with Violet in Onyx Storm. There's even moments where Garrick, I'm like, okay, man, stop.
Yeah.
Like,
I'm like,
what's
you need to relax.
on?
Yeah. Imogen is your girl. Yeah. I think if we didn't have the Xaden POV chapters, I would actually stand behind that way more. But because we have those, I feel good at least about his like intentions around Violet, which leads to my thoughts around like Xaden's goodness, which is not at all in conflict with any of yours. Like I think his actions are questionable and not truly aligned with his intentions all of the time. I think before he meets Violet, he's, in my opinion, kind of objectively good. Like he breaks laws, obviously, but he knows exactly what and why he's breaking these laws and has like the greater good in mind the entire time. He takes on the burden of every single child of separatist. He does illegal things to make sure that they get through the quadrant as best they can. He continues to help the Griffin Flyers despite like potential for him being executed and also everyone being executed. Like he takes massive risk in the name of goodness, but there is a break where he crosses this path of loving Violet, like really loving Violet, where his moral compass seems to legitimately evaporate and it just is Violet. Like Violet is his moral compass. And he answers to her. He makes it abundantly clear, like in any moment where nobility or like leadership is brought up, he's like, I am loyal to Violet.
Right.
No province, no king. Yeah. And so if Violet is good, I think he's good or does everything that he like does in the name of goodness. But if Violet goes dark, I think he's going right there with her. Like I think Violet basically becomes the proxy for his moral compass. And he says, like, my loyalty is to Violet first above everything, everyone else, then Tyrrendor, then Navarre in the moment it's worthy, and it's when Violet is in residence.
And what does Violet get as a gift from Xanal? A broken fucking compass. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's so interesting.
Those gifts are all going to matter.
I think we're on different sides. I think Xaden is good for goodness sake, and you think Xaden is good for Violet. But I think Xaden will do bad things to be good. Like, you fully think in the next book, it's going to be a Xaden smear campaign, right? Like, it's going to be Xaden is so bad. He did this. He blackmailed his way into royalty, it's going to be like the second Spider-Man movie all over again.
And even at the end in the last scene of Onyx Storm, we start to see, like, they want to interrogate Violet. They already are, like, demonizing Xaden. Like, clearly this was Rierson's doing. Yeah.
Right. Like, I think that's what we get in book 4, probably to the point where she's questioning it. Maybe. I don't know.
Maybe. But I don't necessarily see that as, like, us disagreeing, except for maybe that, I guess, like, I am assuming that Violet will always be good.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think there's anything she will choose everyone over herself.
Right. Every time.
Yeah.
And he'll choose you over everyone every time.
Yeah. But I also think that, like, this, like, Violet basically becoming his moral compass once he's exposed to her and in love with her is also more meaningful than just, like, love for Violet, because I think she embodies something bigger than herself.
Yeah, I'd say that's absolutely true. And I think I have this quote written down here, but I think this speaks to both of our theories, where he says, I'll use Tyrrendor to protect you, not you to protect Tyrrendor. Right. Like, kind of the same thing. Because I think he's using the title of Duchess of Tyrrendor to protect her. And you think he would do that, basically, is what you're saying. Like, yeah.
Yeah, I'm just like, of course. Like, oh, he has this new thing at his disposal to protect Violet. Like, doesn't matter if it's the best thing for Tyrrendor. It probably is, because he's working with Aaric, and Aaric doesn't give a shit about either of them. But he's like, this is best for Violet.
About Violet.
Aaric gives a shit about Violet, but he has zero qualms making Xaden unhappy.
Right. I agree with that. I don't think Aaric lifts a finger for Xaden.
Yeah, no.
Yeah. I think you're right.
I think Aaric lifts a finger for he is all about the greater good, and the fact that Xaden and Aaric's incentives seemingly align makes me think that keeping Violet protected is aligned with keeping the world protected.
There's a line. I don't remember, but there's a line where Aaric says how much he loves and respects Violet, basically. It might be when they're in the archives.
The archives, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I thought it was him actually saying the only person I hate more than Xaden is my father.
I don't remember.
Could be both.
I'll say it in the show notes, but we won't. It's fine. If you have it, let us know.
Yeah, trust us.
Yeah. I don't know. And then I just had some notes on maybe why she needed to be the Duchess of Tyrrendor. So we know that the Black Dragon hatching grounds are in Tyrrendor, and there's a large supply of palladium in Tyrrendor, which is used to make the alloy.
Yeah.
Oh, I said I doubt it's either of those things, to be honest, because this fantasy, I don't think it's going to be something practical like that. I don't know. I mean, I guess we also know that there are new dragons hatching in Tyrrendor too. That is probably important. And we know defensively, it's a very defensible province because it's up on those cliffs. So strategically, and it's the largest province. So strategically, it's a very good thing for her to hold. But is that going to be why? I don't think so. It's not going to be something practical like that. It's going to be something magic, something important, I think. Yeah. Anything else to talk about? Is Xaden good?
On Xaden's goodness? No, I think we covered. I just love, I kind of love the image in my mind of Xaden being an agent of Violet, which is genuinely how I see him in terms of his morality, now. Not necessarily an agent of Violet that Violet has control over in terms of his actions, but yeah. But no more. Just sadness.
He's gonna be okay. He has to be okay.
Yeah. Okay, which brings us to our next question, which I guess I pasted this as has Xaden fully turned, but I think what we meant was when Xaden turns, does he lose all of his humanity, right? Do I have the right question?
I think that's kind of the same question.
Okay, which is the question we're answering? Either way, I'll answer it the same way.
I answered, has Xaden fully turned?
Okay, then I will answer that question as well, but it's the same answer to me, honestly. Okay, so the next question we asked ourselves is, has Xaden fully turned? So just to recap, we know that at the end of Iron Flame, Xaden becomes an initiate. He channels from the ground to buy Violet more time to raise the wards. And then at the end of Onyx Storm, we see this big moment where he basically relinquishes all semblance of control and turns ASIM, presumably. And so let's just talk through briefly the moment when he turns, because there's a very specific quote and point in time that makes me fairly confident that he is either not fully turned or he fully turned and he's venin now, but he still has his humanity and loyalties to all the people that he loves, specifically Violet, but still all the people that he loves. So here's the moment he turned, right? How fucking dare they pull my dragon from the sky, snare and hurt the one who anchors my existence. I throw my blades into the air, fall to one knee, splay my hand over the canyon floor, and break. In my final act of resistance, I become the very thing I despise. Maybe it's good that I can't feel a single damn thing. I'm just going to paraphrase here because I don't want to read the whole passage, but he feels his soul kind of depart and start to flake away, and the last remaining pieces of him beg him to save them, which is a scary moment, right? Because you start to think, oh God, are the pieces of him that want to save these people actually going away and dying? He saves Dane and Kath. He saves Sigale. He mentions Imogen, and he says he's listening with satisfaction as their bodies hit the ground in front of the people she loves. He saves them all for Violet.
Their bodies being the wyvern.
The wyvern, yeah. The wyvern that he's killing fall in front of the people that she loves. We're assuming, is Violet. Could be Scale, but probably Violet. Then he says something very important that makes me believe that his soul is not dead. And it's when Violet whispers, I love you. He says her voice cracks the cold, and a silken thread of warmth wedges itself in the opening before it seals shut, locking it into place. So Violet's love and this shred of her seals itself behind Xaden's ice, becoming basically, the way I've interpreted is it becomes part of his venin form once he turns, or becomes part of him for now. And he says after turning, after this is all done, he says, I love her. That's the emotion I cling to. And I know if I take it any further, it will be the next and final piece to float away. And then he basically alludes to the fact that he has a plan, one that he basically takes his ice down, shields down, and lets Scale see. And we know then that this plan is like what unfolds over the next 12 hours. And so I think there's a few important pieces here, right? Like Xaden does not turn out of greed, power, desperation, all the things that we talked about on the last episode, even survival. He doesn't turn out of survival. He first channeled to save Violet, but he ultimately turned for Sigil. We know first love is irreplaceable, and both times he made irreversible choices, they were for love. You mentioned on the last episode that we don't know anybody who's turned for love yet. I think that's true unless we do find out that Naelin turned, in which case he may have realistically turned for love. But we don't know that for sure. So let's focus on Xaden. And then as you also pointed out in the last episode, Theophany has said, our kind don't feel what you call love, and also we lie. So like those two things together, like we think that venin can feel love. I think that Xaden turned out of necessity to choose a path that leaves the people that he loves alive. And he seems to continue, even after turning, executing a plan that saves them all. And there would be absolutely no reason or drive for him to do that, to marry Violet, to continue putting pieces into place with an ultimate end game, seemingly of righting all of these wrongs, if he didn't still feel a moral pull towards protecting them. So I'm curious your thoughts, but I absolutely do not think... I think that Xaden is fully venin, but I do not think that venin necessarily are everything that they have portrayed themselves to be to us in this novel so far, or in this series so far.
Yeah, I guess the real question is Xaden beyond redemption? And I agree the answer is 100% no. I absolutely think he can be saved. I have three things I want to talk about. The first is this idea of a plan, right? I think Xaden knows he's going to turn. I think that for two reasons. One, when he comes back to Orisha, he said, this is towards the end of the book, it's right before the last battle. He kind of comes back and Violet's like, he's in a really good mood. This is really nice. He seems to have hope. And then she realized he's getting his affairs in order, basically. Yeah. And he says, I'm going to make the most of the days that we have together. And she's like, what do you mean days? Like weeks, months, like, but he says days. And then on the cliff, in the quote you mentioned before, where Sigil says, you have not turned yet because of his actions, do not do it now. He says, do this, it's already done. Like this happens. Like there is no choice. Like I turn. There aren't, maybe not I turn, but I do this right now. I channel right now. Like this is it. So I do think he knows he's going to channel on the cliff before he gets there. I don't think he knows they're going to capture Sigil. I think he's enraged about that, but I think he knows he does not walk away from this battle with his soul fully intact. So I have some deep dive things here, which I think are interesting. And this still leads me to no, he has not fully turned. There are a lot of Xaden and Andarna parallels in this book in the way that the characters are written. So we'll start with like the basic thing. When Leothan, I had his name in my notes the whole time, shows up. So we know that the quest squad is like assembled to go find Andarna's parents and Andarna's family. They find them and then they reject Andarna because she's too violent. But Leothan, who's an elder in her den, comes back at the end of Onyx Storm because they are of the same den and because he was kind of like, I didn't feel great about what happened. We just like kind of abandoned you. I think you do deserve to learn our ways. But what we find out is that he was watching her during one of the battles. I think it's the same battle where they protect the Temple of Dune. What Leothan says to Andarna is your behavior is abhorrent and your actions were misguided, but your motives are honorable. That's what he says to Andarna. We also find out that Mira, Violet's sister. You guys all know who Mira is. I don't need to explain this. She has gone off and found Grandma, Asher's mother. Grandma tells her that they dedicated Violet, that Asher tried to dedicate Violet to Dune in the Isles, but they wouldn't take her because her paths were not set. And what the priestess said exactly was, she said, the heart that beat for you or within you would do the wrong thing for the right reasons, reach for unspeakable power and turn dark, right? So we have these two parallels, right? You are doing bad things, but you are doing them for the right reasons, right? So in my mind, Andarna is a good character. Xaden is we just went over this. Is Xaden good? Yes. He does the wrong things, but he does them for the right reasons. So that's the first parallel. The reason I'm bringing this up is because of when Andarna leaves, right? So when Andarna leaves, the way Violet describes it, She says, my heart stutters, my lungs cease their struggle. There's no air and no reason to seek it. I was infinite yet moored. Now I'm hollow and adrift in waters too vast to comprehend. I'm nothing. And then Tyrrendor comes in, right? The sky darkens, the ground trembles, blah, blah, blah. He says, you will breathe. His deep, gravelly voice fills my head, and unyielding strength barrels down the pathway that connects us. Tyrrendor, he exists, therefore I must, because we are bound, never alone, always connected. She left us, she left us, she left us. It's all I can think. We remain Tyrrendors, as if I have a choice not to, right? When Xaden turns, he says, my soul departs like pieces of ash from a fire, flaking free and drifting away as power consumes the space and once inhabitants. I'm no longer on the ice. I am the ice. And then Violet says, I love you. And all that stuff with the soul happens, right? In my mind, these are pretty much the same things, right? Like Violet is adrift. Xaden's soul departs like pieces of ash from the fire. Like they're both talking about the same things, right? Like their soul is just leaving their body. This part of them is gone. And then someone grounds them. Someone pulls them back and says, no, you have to be here. You have to stay with me. You cannot be fully gone. And we know that Violet recovers from Andarna. And there's even more language. Like she says at one point, I was whole and now I'm not, when Andarna leaves. And Xaden says to Gale consents that he's not whole, right? So there's all these parallels to these two situations. And we know that Violet recovers. Like, yes, Andarna comes back, but Violet recovers even before that. So I think basically I'm in agreement with you. I don't think Xaden is fully irredeemable because it wouldn't make sense from a story perspective. But also, I think we have this parallel with Andarna. I think this was Rebecca signaling to us that this is how you keep yourself tethered, right? And that's what they call each other, right? Violet is Xaden's tether. Like they are tethered. This is how you keep yourself not whole, but completely.
Yeah. And it would be really interesting. Like, I know that Tyrrendor has tossed the word mates around and basically like fake confirmed that humans don't have them, which I don't know if I believe. But like, it's interesting to propose the fact that Violet can be Xaden's tether when you would expect it to be Sigale. Like, you would think that like Tyrrendor was the tether for Violet to be on this earth. Like she said, I exist for Tyrrendor, I live for Xaden. And so it calls into question whether Violet and Xaden's bond can be independent of their dragons. And I know we both kind of think that it can, but...
And maybe Xaden's bond... Well, I think that it is. I think Sigale kind of gives up on him, right? And Violet won't. And Tyrrendor does not give up on Violet. Like, he's like, I know she's gone, but we're still here. And Sigale says, will you forsake me now? And she says, what is there left to forsake? Like, maybe if Sigale had fought for him the way Violet does, it would have been Sigale, but it doesn't.
It's a really,
kind of
like,
sad.
when you think about it, it's like a devastating foursome in that, like, Sigale is watching Xaden do anything he can for Violet, and Sigale is like, what the fuck? And Violet is doing, like, Violet will choose Tyrrendor, I think. Like, I don't think she'll ever really be presented with the choice, but yes. Like, we are witnessing a situation where Sigale is locked on Xaden all the time. Xaden is locked on Violet all the time. Violet is anchored to Tyrrendor. He is the gift of her life. And Tyrrendor is anchored to Sigale. And like, yes, of course, like the two, like the riders and their dragons are like intrinsically linked and bonded. And like Xaden quite literally goes like completely crazy when they start to threaten Sigale. But like in terms of who's doing who for what and who expects their bonded to just kind of like tolerate them and their choices, like we have a literal square. Andarna's off somewhere, but amongst all of them, we have an emotional square.
My God, I just had a thought. Like, okay, so I've seen a lot on the socials this week about how Sigale is a surrogate mother for Xaden, right?
And Andarna, but yes.
And she kind of abandons him the way that Talia does, right? But if you follow that thread, then Tyrrendor is also a surrogate father for Violet. And assuming we think Asher is who he says he is, Asher is such a better father than Talia is a mother. And like Tyrrendor will never, like Asher would never abandon Violet, unless we find out, of course, he did. But in Violet's mind, Asher would never abandon her, right? So it's like, it's just following the pattern of their parents.
Yeah. Sad. It's just sad. Like, I don't really think there's too much to it. Like, I think they'll continue to make choices in that pattern, but like, we've never seen Tyrrendor in battle like throw himself off because of where Sigale is. We
That's
see
so
Xaden
true.
do that for Violet all the time. We see Violet do it for Tyrrendor and for Xaden all the time. But like, yeah, it's gut wrenching to think about all of the things that could happen with all of their linked emotions. All the things that probably did happen because we know that Xaden's gone.
Yeah, that's so true. Like Gale shows up to save Violet because Xaden is freaking out.
And we've heard Sigale like, how could you let this happen to him? To Violet when Tyrrendor gets like a wing spur stuck in his side. We have never heard anything like, and maybe Tyrrendor spares her, like maybe we're just not hearing it from Xaden's POV. But I've heard so little or seen so little of Tyrrendor to Xaden, like, how could you let this happen to her? He's always like, Sigale can handle herself.
Yeah. Damn, the true love story the whole time is Violet and Tyrrendor.
Yeah. I feel good about where we left that.
I think it's parental love versus, love. Like it's you'll do
100%.
anything. You'll do anything for your children. That's what Lilith says over and over again, right? Like you will do anything for your children.
Well, and also like first love is irreplaceable. Like Sigale was there for Xaden far before Violet was, and he turns for her, and Tyrrendor was there. I mean, to be fair, like around when Xaden is there, but first. Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, yeah, Xaden and Andarna. Parallels.
Did you have a third point?
No, the fate versus free will thing, which we talked about at the top. Like, yeah, Xaden fully knows he's not walking away from this. Like there's no doubt in my mind. Especially because Aaric leaves the note that says strike in the dark. Like,
Yeah.
I think and we should talk about this more when we talk about Cygnus and like how much of a precog is Aaric truly? Like, what does he know? I think he knows the outcomes of things. I think he doesn't necessarily know how those things happen, which is why I think there's so much anger from Xaden about Sigale being captured. But yeah, like they know this is what happens.
Yeah, I think my hypothesis on Aaric, and we will talk about it more in Cygnus, is he knows the things that need to fall into place to make an outcome occur, but he doesn't necessarily understand like the collateral damage that happens throughout it or like all of the gory details. And he might, as he gets older, he's literally a first year, but yeah.
Yeah, or he did know Sigale was going to get captured, but he couldn't tell Xaden because he needed Xaden to feel that anger.
Yes. And if Xaden had found a way, like maybe Xaden needed to turn, and if he had found a way to free Sigale, then he wouldn't have, or it would have gone down some other path. I do think we should at some point talk about like whether there's even potential for Aaric to manipulate Xaden, because if Xaden is a full mind reader, then like Aaric needs to have a really good handle on his shields in order to withhold information from Xaden. But if he can, then that's also interesting, right? Because Aaric has his own motivations that are not, they seem to have to date be aligned with Xaden's, but they could not always be.
I think they're only as aligned with Xaden's as long as Xaden's fate is tied to the fate of the greater good. Right. I think it's exactly what we were talking about before.
And Violet's, yeah.
Yeah, Aaric might be our moral compass in this book. Like he might be the only one with truly pure motivations. But I'm not convinced we have enough to know that yet. He just hasn't done anything sketchy in my mind.
Well, he's also given up quite a lot to do what he's doing. And so you would hope that like the fact that he quite literally threw away his entire like title, position, any possibility of ever holding power, that he acts with good intentions.
Yeah, I know. And it's kind of crazy, the idea. He had to sacrifice more than anyone else to get into the Riders Quadrant. And then he becomes a true precog. Like, that doesn't feel like coincidence, right? Like, yeah, something's up there.
Something's there. But it is like, if you're going to have a rider in the quadrant, like, that is an ideal signet for nobility, right? So
I hope he never becomes king. Oh my God. That's too much power for one person.
Yeah. But I think there's like an epigraph about Melgren's signet and like when it manifested like warfare for Navarre.
Yeah, it changed the face of warfare forever.
Yeah.
So we talked for 2.5 hours about Xaden, and then we decided that that was a really long time to be talking. So we took a little break. So this episode, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, is gonna be a two-parter. So you just listened to part 1, and part 2 is gonna come next week. We're really sorry, but we also know that everyone always wants to talk about Xaden, so we're not really that sorry. But we hope you'll join us next week.
I'm not that sorry. See you next week. Okay, thanks for listening. Also, obligatory, if you disagree with anything we said, we welcome it. We are Dragons in the Details pod on Instagram and TikTok. Feel free to leave comments or suggestions.
But not really suggestions. Like, I don't care. But maybe.
I kind of like, I enjoy when someone is like, hold on, it's totally this instead. And I'm like, you know what?
Oh, yeah. Theory suggestions. Theory suggestions, absolutely. But if you have suggestions about how to run our pod, I don't want to hear them. I do not care.
Okay, I agree with that. But if you have suggestions for topics you want us to talk about,
Yes, absolutely.
one of us is more open to criticism than the other. Anyways, sorry we talked for 2 hours and 20 minutes. We promise this is a good move for you.
Everyone needs a water break.
Okay, see you
Bye.
next time. Bye.